Today we're going to be taking this brand new Rlaarlo Omni Terminator and turning it into the best small basher in the world. And we're going to do that using all of this. We have got basically every single upgrade that Rlaarlo makes for it. We've got Castle ESCs, new tires, a really awesome low profile servo, some Arrma parts we're going to be customizing, and we're going to be doing a bunch of other really cool modifications. I think it was really smart of Rlaarlo to make a bunch of upgrades for their cars. Most of the lesser known brand vehicles don't really have a lot of upgrade options available, and people really do enjoy upgrading their cars. I'm really looking forward to checking out the quality of their upgrades. I got just about every upgrade you can for this car. I skipped things like the aluminum arms because I don't think those are good for a basher, but we got just about everything else for this thing. So let's dig in and get this torn apart. This car comes with a 3-cell battery, but I want to run it on 4S, so obviously we're going to have to replace the ESC. We're also going to be replacing the servo with a pretty beefy one that I'm kind of excited to try out because I've never really used a low profile servo before. And this one definitely looks like it's going to be an awesome one. We're going to be taking a look inside this low profile servo to see if it's any different from a standard one as well. As you can see, I think our new servo is going to be a little bit beefier. I'm not 100% sure how this new servo works with this aluminum servo mount, but looking at the build quality of this aluminum piece really makes me excited to get all the upgrades installed on this. Now we just need to unstick this ESC, assuming it's like Rlaarlo's normal double-sided tape. It shouldn't be too hard to do. Yep, very, very easy. I really think Rlaarlo needs to work on a better double-sided tape, as most of the cars I've gotten from them have had this fall off pretty quickly. Of course, in this particular instance for us, it's actually a good thing because it makes everything easy to remove. And it looks like our Castle Copperhead 10 should fit perfectly in there with just a little bit of trimming, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. For now, we've got a lot of stuff we're replacing in here, including upgrading the center differential and pretty much everything up here in the steering. I do wish Rlaarlo would avoid using these 1.5mm screws in their cars. They can get stripped out pretty easily, and it's not really necessary in a car this large. That's interesting. They use bushings instead of bearings in the steering. I'm actually kind of surprised that the upgraded system also uses bushings. Bearings would have been a nice upgrade here to go along with the aluminum steering rack. The version I have here comes with these carbon fiber center plates. I'm not entirely convinced these are actually better than the aluminum ones. However, if you're going to buy one of these Omni Terminators, I definitely recommend getting the carbon version just because you get better gears in the differentials, you get the bigger motor, as well as the appropriate motor mount for doing motor upgrades, a much nicer transmitter, and a few other nice to have bits and pieces for not a lot more money. Now at this point, unfortunately, the center differential is still locked in here, so we're going to have to go further. Last time I took the entire rear bulkhead off to get it out, but I'm curious to see if I take this motor mount off, if we can slide it out the front. Let's find out. All right, guys, due to my impatience, I've gotten myself in trouble here. I've rounded off this screw. This is a great time to talk about how to remove screws with stripped heads. First way is don't do this in the first place. I did this because I got impatient and I didn't heat up the thread locker before I started to remove it. As you can see, we've definitely stripped out the socket in that screw. All hope's not lost, though. We have a few different options. The first thing we want to do is fix the original problem, which is to soften up that thread locker, which we're going to do by holding an iron up against it and warming it up. Once we do that, we've got a couple different options. We could take a Dremel and cut a little slit in here and use a flathead screwdriver to take it out. We could get a Torx bit that's about the same size as this hex bit and try and take it out that way. What I want to try first, though, is just driving this hex bit in as deep as possible after heating up the thread lock and seeing if we can just remove it that way. How long you keep this on here for is sort of a judgment call. You'll have to kind of feel it out for yourself. I think that feels about long enough. Let's see if we can just push this bit in as hard as possible and get this screw to come out. And no, it is still stripping. Let's drive this Torx bit in. And let's see if we can't get this screw out of here. Well, there you go, guys. Sometimes everything fails. That thing is really in there. I'd have to drill it out, so let's go ahead and just take this apart a different way. Fortunately, we can take this entire rear end off and get the center differential out. I do wish Rlaarlo had made the center differential a little easier to get out, but there we go. We've got the old one out, and here you can contrast it to the upgraded one. We have an aluminum differential housing here, and these are S2 tool steel out drives. Most of the steel components are going to be replaced with S2 tool steel. Hopefully that's better. We've also got an S2 tool steel center drive shaft. They are the same diameter, but again, this should be better material. I think I want to thicken up the center differential fluid just a little bit. While we're at it, we can see if there's anything upgraded inside the differential. Okay, the gears inside look exactly the same. That's no big surprise. You definitely want to be really careful with these M1.5 screws though, because they use a ton of thread locker in these aluminum housings and they're very easy to strip out. And we're just going to add a tiny bit of earplug to what's already in there just to stiffen it up a little bit. There we go, that feels a little bit stiffer. All right, let's just get this installed. And that definitely does look sweet in there. Now, while we have the rear module off, let's go ahead and upgrade this rear differential. Fortunately, they do make this fairly easy with a rear access cover. And we take that off and we can see the stock differential in here. If you have the alloy version of the truck, you're going to want to go ahead and replace this pinion gear as well. However, since we have the carbon version, it's the same gear, so we'll just go ahead and install the differential itself. We've also got upgraded dog bones, but we'll get these installed when we install the rear hubs. Yeah, it fits in there nicely. We can check the mesh, which actually feels really, really good. I don't think there's any shimming necessary here. No need to upgrade the shock tower or these shocks because they are already all metal and the shock tower itself is 7075. We do, however, have an upgraded input shaft. Now, some of you might be asking why I'm not putting extra grease on these teeth. As you can see, the teeth are already wet with grease, and that's basically all you need. Anything that isn't on the actual tooth profile is just a waste and makes a mess. The amount of grease that these gears actually use for lubrication is microscopic, and as long as you can see grease on these teeth, you're good to go. The next thing we're going to be upgrading are these rear hubs. Is this necessary? Probably not, but they certainly are going to look good. These kinds of all-out upgrade builds are probably my favorite videos to do, and if you're having a good time too, make sure you get subscribed because this is definitely not the last one of these we're going to be doing. Now we've also got some nice S2 tool steel stub axles, so we'll get those swapped in. As you can see, Rlaarlo does put a shim between the hex and the bearing. That actually helps take some of the slop out of the system, which is a really nice touch that a lot of companies don't do. One thing that I didn't think about doing that you might want to do if you're going to be doing an ultimate build of your own would be to replace these shielded bearings with sealed bearings. If you're going to be running in deep water or mud, these shielded bearings probably aren't going to last that long. I also separately ordered some upgraded hexes for these. Unfortunately, they don't quite fit, so we'll be using the plastic hexes for now. Rlaarlo does offer a 17mm hex upgrade, but we're not going to be using tires with 17mm hexes. We're actually going to be using these stock Traxxas Rustler 4-wheel drive tires. They're a fair amount bigger than the stock tires and should work pretty well as an upgrade for this car. We'll have to see when we take it out and bash it though. Inconveniently, the aluminum hubs use these little spacers. That's just a cost-saving measure on their end because it means their original stock doesn't have to be as wide on the main hub, but it is kind of a pain to put together. That's not too bad though. And we'll just add in this fancy tool steel shaft. And then this side's just about ready to go. Now the really interesting stuff's going to be on the front end with that upgraded servo and all the steering bits, but this definitely is an improved look from stock. I really like how everything coordinates with this green color. When you buy aftermarket parts that aren't from the original manufacturer, normally the colors aren't quite perfect, but of course these are straight from Rlaarlo, so they are. All right, now we just need to do the other side. I often have people ask me why I don't put links to parts in the descriptions of the videos. Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is links are always changing, so if I put links in the description right now, they're probably going to be different in a month. But second, and more importantly, I don't want you guys to think I'm trying to sell you anything. I don't do affiliate links, and this channel isn't even monetized. I do this channel purely for fun and to interact with you guys. That being said, most of the time these parts are coming directly from the manufacturer, or you can just Google them to get the part numbers. All the green parts you're seeing here came directly from Rlaarlo's website, so if you want to replicate this build, all you have to do is go there and pick up just about everything they make for the car, and you'll be basically in the same place we are now. And if you do ever see an affiliate link down in the description, that's going to be a zero kickback link, and it's just there so you can get a discount, and sometimes so the manufacturer can track sales. There we go, guys. That's the entire rear end done, and I think it looks really, really nice. Can't wait to get the rest of this done. Let's get to it. I'm not super clear on how this mount is supposed to work. I believe the servo is supposed to go in it upside down like this, which looks like it should work fine. Before we do that though, I want to take a look inside this servo. I've never really seen a low profile servo before because they're normally used in racing, and I'm curious to see what this looks like. This is a pretty high-end servo. You can definitely get cheaper low profile servos, but since this is an ultimate build, I wanted to go all the way. This AGFRC servo is brushless. We can see we've got O-rings on the screws. Popping the bottom cover off. This does look like a fairly standard servo. We can see we've got 3 motor driver MOSFETs, so this is a brushless servo. This looks like a fairly standard drivetrain. However, you can see they've got more gears in here, and those gears have a staggered offset. That allows for a more compact installation on this low profile servo. You can see we've got all steel gears here except for the output for the motor, which appears to be brass. Overall, this servo looks really nice, and being AGFRC, I expect it to be a good quality servo. They actually OEM for quite a few other brands. The Power Hobby 729 that I recommend to everybody as a standard servo is made by AGFRC, as well as that perfect pass servo that people really, really like from Raz Schifrin. Let me get this back together and we'll see how it installs. Okay, looks like the install is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to be putting the servo in upside down, and then the steering link looks like it'll mount just like this. We do get a different ball mount for that steering link, which should work with a regular servo horn, so that's pretty well figured out. However, we are losing our receiver box. My initial thought was to take this Arrma receiver box, cut it down, and put it on top, but I think that's going to be too bulky. So instead what I think we'll do is just take our receiver and mount it directly either here or on top of the servo. This receiver is PPX4 water resistant, and that is slightly water resistant, but I don't think it's water resistant enough. So let's go ahead and take this apart and see just what they're doing to make it water resistant. Just push in these tabs and we can pull the board out. You can do this with most receivers. They all kind of come apart the same way. And as you can see from that shiny surface there, what they've done is they've put some conformal coating on here in order to make it water resistant. But you can also see they've done a really bad job of it. So we're going to beef up that water resistance with some MG Chemicals acrylic conformal coating. This stuff really stinks, so I recommend using it outside. And you could probably also use nail polish because, to be honest with you, this stuff smells exactly like nail polish, but this is actually fairly inexpensive for what you get, and it's the real deal. So I'd recommend going with this. We're going to do a nice thick coating on both sides of both boards and all around the edges. The only place you really need to be careful of are these pins. You don't want to get any conformal coating on those because they'll prevent it from working properly. Once we do that, this will be nice and sealed up and it won't really matter how wet it gets. While that's drying, this strip screw's really been bugging me, so I'm going to go ahead and try to cut a screwdriver slot in it. Let's see if we can get this out of here. Unfortunately, it looks like I just barely touched the chassis there, but now we've got a nice flathead screwdriver slot in there. I can use a high quality screwdriver. Let's put some heat on here, see if we can defeat this screw or if it's going to defeat me. All right, well, that got out of hand pretty quickly. I ended up having to drill it, then take everything apart and use a pair of vice grips to get the remainder out of there. The moral of this story is take your time when removing fasteners. Otherwise, you're going to end up taking a lot more time removing them. And while we were working on that, the conformal coating is dried and we can actually use a UV light to check the coverage. You can see I missed a little spot there, but every place where there are electronics on here is well coated, so I think this is going to be nice and waterproof. We'll get this installed here in just a little bit. For now, let's get this front end off and get it upgraded. All right, that should be everything unscrewed. This should be free now. And there we go. Now we've got quite a bit to upgrade here, starting with the steering. One thing I find really helpful when doing a steering upgrade is to keep the stock parts in their original order. That makes it a lot easier to figure out where the new parts go. And we've also got some S2 tool steel tie rods to replace the stock ones. Don't forget your thread locker when you're screwing into aluminum. Whenever you're assembling an aluminum servo saver, you're going to need to lubricate the sliding edges of the servo saver itself. I like to use this dry fluid RC car lubricant. It's a dry lube that doesn't attract dirt, but still keeps the aluminum from getting jammed up, which it will do if you don't use any lubricant at all. And then I like to put a little bit of thread lock on the adjustment nut. This just prevents it from loosening up on you in the future. And we're going to make this fairly tight because we've got a pretty beefy servo on here that doesn't need a lot of saving. These front knuckles actually have steel bushings in them. This is a high quality touch that you don't always see on small cars like this. It's really nice to see on this one. I'm definitely curious to see if these new front CVDs will be able to handle 4S power with that Castle system. We just need the bearings out of this, and we'll put those in the nice shiny new aluminum hub. And there we go. I think you get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this upgraded off camera. Let's move on to something more interesting. And now for one of the parts I've been looking forward to the most. Oh yeah, that looks good. And now we just need to install the new servo mount. Before we install this servo, we're going to need some power to center it, so let's get the ESC installed. And to do that, we're going to need to do just a little bit of trimming of the chassis right here in the corner. This is pretty simple. We're just going to take a pair of flush cutters and nip that corner out. And now the ESC should fit in here just fine. And with that, we are one step closer. I cannot wait to get big tires in this thing and bash this beast. The last real challenge we need to overcome is this servo. I'm going to have to install the servo horn before I install the servo, so I need to make sure everything's lined up correctly. I went ahead and lengthened the linkage a little bit and installed the ball that will work with these standard servo horns. Let's go ahead and get this set up. After doing some experimenting, it looks like we need to have the servo horn one notch that way in order for everything to line up properly. Let's get this installed and see how it works. There we go, guys. This servo's all installed, and man, does she feel good. That's definitely an improvement from the stock one and should do great with these bigger tires. Speaking of which, let me get this wiring tidied up, get the tires installed, and she is ready to bash. Now, I might be biased, but I think this truck looks absolutely stunning. I cannot wait to see how it performs. Let's go find out. All right, let's see how fast she is. Okay, she's definitely got the power. Pretty smooth, too. Not bad. That's only about 3/4 throttle. Let's give it full throttle. A little hard to control. Give it one more pass. All right, let's see how fast she is. 42 miles an hour. That's not bad for a little car like this. Let's see how durable it is. So, is this the ultimate mini basher? I'm gonna say yes. It's just big enough that you can do anything that you would do with a larger basher, but it only weighs a few pounds and is super portable. As long as you don't go crazy with the upgrades, it's also really affordable. That being said, I think some of these upgrades are worthwhile. I like the servo saver. I really like this upgraded servo. It's got lots of power and speed. I think upgrading to 4S is a great idea. And I think that these 4-wheel drive Rustler tires are also really, really good. They give it a bit more air control, and they make it really easy to self-right if you're into that kind of thing. So what do you guys think of this car? Did I go too far overboard? Not far enough? What kind of upgrades would you do to your Omni Terminator to make it the perfect small basher for you? Let me know down in the comments, get subscribed, then watch one of these guys.